Before there was a Potter County, Pennsylvania, these hills and valleys belonged to a distant collection of American colonies. Today, many families in Potter County can trace their lineage directly to those soldiers, wives, and children of the American Revolution. Colonial life was defined by hard work, close communities, faith, and opportunity. Yet beneath the routines of daily life, a growing unrest took hold. The British government imposed taxes without representation. Trade was restricted. Laws were enforced by troops the colonists had no voice in choosing. By the mid-1770s, opposition was no longer a whisper. It was becoming a movement. Music of the times gave voice to a growing belief that freedom depended on unity and resistance was justified. The idea of independence was no longer radical. It was a unifying mission. The colonists had had enough. In whispered conversations and raised voices alike, a truth emerged. Liberty was not a gift of the crown. It was a birthright. Songs carried that truth from town to town. Songs of unity, of defiance, of courage. A promise sung aloud. We will not be ruled without consent.
Come join hand in hand, brave Americans all, and rouse your bold hearts at fair liberty's call. No tyrannous act shall suppress your just claim, or stain with dishonor America's name. In freedom we're born, and in freedom we live. Our purses are ready. Steady, friends, steady, not as slaves, but as free men our money will give.
From the many, leaders rose. They gathered not in comfort, but in conviction. Ideas were sharpened, principles tested. The impossible weighed against the necessary. A nation took shape, first as a thought. Plans grew complex, but so did the risk. Every decision carried consequence. Every step forward meant no return. They knew what independence would demand, and still they chose it. But even on the edge of rebellion, there was joy. Spirits were lifted. Not ignorance of danger, but defiance of it. For what is freedom, if not worth celebrating before it is won? As the moment approached, silence followed song. Would sacrifice be enough? Would hope endure the coming storm? In the quiet, faith remained, that beyond loss a light waited. In candlelit rooms and crowded chambers, minds sharper than steel gathered. Not generals alone, but thinkers, lawyers, merchants, philosophers. They studied empire. They measured weakness. They calculated risk. From argument and reason, they composed a plan. Not merely to resist an army, but to outthink it. Strategy became their weapon. Unity became their strength. Given the seriousness of their task, music and dance offered relief, strengthening morale and reinforcing community bonds. These moments helped sustain a spirit of resistance. As conflict drew closer, colonists reflected on what lay ahead. The risks were clear: loss of property, family, and life. Yet hope endured. Hope that their efforts would create a nation founded on liberty and self-governance. But what struck closest to home was the fear that decisions made an ocean away could undo years of hard work and unity. A consensus emerged among our ancestors that what they had created was worth fighting for. Still, many settlers weighed the risk of British control against the very real possibility that his family might struggle to survive in his absence. To town meetings, church gatherings, and local militias, they came to understand that defending the colony was a shared responsibility. Uncertainty weighed heavily on people from every walk of life. Their faith was tested daily as they balanced their need to survive with their commitment to the greater good and hope of a better future for all. So it was in those early days. Adams, Franklin, Jefferson, Washington. Different temperaments, different convictions, yet they formed a single purpose. Not chaos, but counterpoint. Ideas crossing like melodies, challenging, refining, strengthening, until strategy became symphony and rebellion became revolution. History tells of our nation's founding fathers, but much less is said about the ordinary people. Who were these men and women who quietly laid the foundation for the nation we cherish today? Their lives were simple, but their convictions were not. Whispers of liberty traveled faster than horses, carried in taverns, churches, and town squares. A question echoed in every heart. Are we free or merely enduring? When the first shots rang out, they were not fired by soldiers born to war, but by citizens pushed to a breaking point. Fear marched beside them, but so did resolve. They faced the greatest empire on earth with threadbare coats, empty stomachs, and an unshakable belief that self-rule was worth any cost. Winter tested their bodies. Loss tested their spirits. Friends fell. Families waited. Hope flickered, but it never went out. They were not perfect. They argued. They stumbled. They disagreed fiercely. But they dared to imagine a nation built not on bloodlines or crowns, but on ideals, that all are created equal, that liberty is not granted but inherent, and that the power of a nation rests with its people. Willing to stake their lives on an abiding faith that when victory finally came, it would not be an ending, but rather a beginning. While the war stories usually focus on battles and generals, the revolution also happened in kitchens, fields, and workshops, carried on the backs of families just trying to survive. During the months when men were off fighting, families back home took over farms, shops, taverns, and workshops. Suddenly, they were managing accounts, hiring labor, planting and harvesting food, making clothes. If it kept people alive, women were doing it. Children took on adult work early, plowing fields, caring for siblings, helping however they could. Older boys sometimes joined local militias. Families made uniforms, socks, blankets, and other supplies for soldiers. Some women acted as nurses, cooks, and laundresses in army camps, tending to their wounds, preparing their meals, and lifting their spirits in the midst of hardship and uncertainty. They wrote letters, sent food, and tried to keep the morale alive, even as anger and hardship were a constant presence. Homes were raided or occupied. Price gouging, shortages, and famine were common. Since that first generation stood and chose freedom, every generation has been tested. Some on distant battlefields, some in times of division and unrest, some through sacrifice, some through service, and some through the quiet courage of standing up for what is right when it is easier to stay silent. Each generation has been asked the same question in a different voice. Will you carry this forward? Today, that question is ours. If you live in Potter County today, there's a possibility that the blood of liberty runs in your veins. An ancestor who endured winter without boots, who crossed icy rivers, who stood in smoke and thunder believing that freedom was worth the cost. Their courage became your inheritance. They could not have imagined highways and schools, townships and churches, families gathered in peace. But they imagined something greater, a nation where descendants would live unbound. You are those descendants.
Join hand in hand, brave Americans all. By uniting we stand, mighty above every fall. In so righteous a cause, let us hope to succeed. For heaven approves of its generous deed. as safe, but as free, and our money will give.
But lest we forget, the rights we cherish today were bought with courage and struggle, never to be taken for granted. Journals kept by some of the soldiers reveal the horrors of war and the harsh conditions they were forced to endure. Their words provide us with keen insights into the emotional toll that the fighting took on their souls.
The nights are the worst. I lie awake on the frozen ground, wrapped in rags that barely keep out the cold. Many of us have no shoes, and the snow burns our feet like fire. Sickness is spreading through the camp like a curse. I've watched strong men grow weak and die without ever firing a shot. Still, each morning we rise, because surrender would mean everything we suffer is for nothing. When battle begins, fear crashes over me like a wave. Muskets roar, cannons shake the earth, and thick smoke blinds us as men scream and fall around me. The smell of gunpowder and blood clings to the air. I grip my weapon with shaking hands, knowing one wrong step could be my last. What haunts me most is not the fighting, but the silence afterward. I see faces of friends who will never speak again. Their lives ended in an instant. There are no doctors here, no comfort for the wounded, only hurried prayers and hopeless waiting. I fear capture almost just as much as death, knowing the suffering that awaits prisoners. I fight on because I must. I think of my family, of the home I may never see again, and of a life where we are no longer ruled by a distant king. Fear lives in my chest, exhaustion weighs down my soul, but hope keeps me standing.
We are the descendants of those who risked everything for an idea they would not live to fully see. We have inherited their gift, the United States of America, not as something fragile to fear, but as something precious to cherish. A nation unfinished, yet enduring. Powerful not because it is perfect, but because its people continue to strive toward its ideals. It is our duty to protect it, to strengthen it, and to pass it on, so that those who follow us may stand taller, live freer, and know the same promise that once stirred the hearts of ordinary people who dared to do something extraordinary. Freedom was their fight, liberty was their dream, and the future, now and always, remains our responsibility.
My country, 'tis of thee, sweet